The pandemic is taking a toll on everyone, including our kids. They're out of school, out of their routines, and missing their friends. So tonight's guest for Coronavirus Your Good Questions is Dr. Anthony Pisani, an associate professor of psychiatry and pediatrics at the University of Rochester. Tonight he'll talk about the mental health and well-being of children. We are streaming this interview live on our Facebook page, so you can leave your questions for Dr. Pisani. Doctor, thanks for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, so we're talking a lot about reopening in the last few days. Schools are still up in the air, but we've already had several weeks of kids not only home from school, but many of them trapped at home, I guess you'd say. What are some of the greatest concerns you have right now from the mental health aspect of our children? And why don't we start with the younger children, and then we'll jump to teenagers.
Sure, Brett, thank you. And while it's important to talk about those concerns, and there are real concerns for people's mental health, I think it's also important to set this in a context that there are, a lot of really positive things happening as well. In some cases, I think probably if I had been here a year ago, you would have invited me on to talk about how kids are going to deal with all the stress of sports and academics and all of these things, and some of that has changed, and for some people, depending upon their circumstances, those are changes that are for the better. There's also opportunities here like there's never been to model for kids how do we face change. There's a ton of research about the importance of a growth mindset when it comes to change and adversity. And so we have real opportunities now, without putting too much of a, rose-colored glasses on. This is really serious, and there's been a lot of loss. But at the same time, we want to kind of make sure that we're keeping a balanced picture.
Do you sense that there is a little more anxiety among younger kids rather than teenagers?
Yeah, so then maybe we could talk about young kids. This is really hard for them. When even online schooling is different when you're 6 than when you're 16. Just a lot harder to kind of replicate some of the experiences. So yeah, there is some anxiety. It's also the time when communication skills are just developing, and so kids may show their feelings more than be able to speak their feelings, and those are some real concerns. I think the disruption of routines. Many kids really sort of thrive on those routines. Others might welcome it. They may be getting more sleep than they normally do, but it's really challenging.
What about for teenagers? What sort of concerns do you see for the older kids?
Yeah, that's a time really when social connections really begin to form even more strongly at school, where people. Where kids' focus is on their peers, and so that's a big disruption for kids. There's also probably at that point many activities that might be, really valuable. They're farther along towards really having developed, passions and interests, and those kind of quickly were taken away. So those are some concerns, and kids who might engage in risky behavior might do that more so when they're bored. So it'll be important to talk about what kinds of things to do to kind of address some of those.
In addition to this lack of being with their friends, one of the big concerns has to be added screen time. I know watching my boys, they have their noses in their phones or on the Xbox, whether for socialization or just for entertainment. Why don't we break this down by age groups again? There are plenty of studies on the impact social media has on tweens and teens. Do you think the added reliance on technology is helping or hurting, or maybe a bit of both?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of both. But I think, first of all, the research about screen time is that there is a small but pretty robust connection between the amount of time kids spend beyond maybe 1 or 2 hours, the amount of time they spend, and some mental health problems. But the way I would really think about it is in terms of what, where, and when. In some ways, the how much is going to be very difficult right now to regulate. I think I've really heard some recommendations to maybe even we'll have to loosen that up. I mean, kids are going to be on their screens for school. They're going to be on their screens for entertainment. And all of us are on our screens more too. But I think you can think in terms of what. Well, what kinds of entertainment? If it's a video game, is it a violent video game? Movies. This is a great time to explore, encourage movies that are about overcoming. Our family has been working our way through the Marvel series, where you see people, even though there's some violence there, it's all towards this idea of overcoming threats to society. And that's what all of us are doing. And, to that point, we are really doing that. And I think that's an important message for young kids as well as teenagers, is that, these measures, they're not going to be gone overnight, and they're not easy, and we have to persist in them, but we really do seem to be making a difference. And that means that kids who've stayed home from school, who've given up their activities, have really contributed to saving people's lives. There are, I'm quite certain, older people especially, who are alive right now thanks to the measures that our kids have been taking. And sometimes I think, I love the hashtag that your station is promoting right now. Is it Rock Rising?
Right.
Or right? Yeah. I mean, I think that's and I think that's really a very encouraging kind of thing, because there are a lot of stories of recovery. When it comes to screen time for teenagers, I think some of the same things go. We want to think about what. You want to think about where, though, especially for teenagers. Meaning when possible, having that social media or screen time happen in public places. A lot of kids are used to having those things in their rooms, and each family has to decide for themselves. But in general, when we can, to try to encourage, if we can't always manage the amount of time, have that be in public spaces, because when you're bored, especially maybe for teenagers, that's a chance where there's maybe temptations to go into places that are darker on the internet and more dangerous. So whenever possible, want to think about what, potentially something uplifting, where, hopefully if you can, in public places, and when, especially for teenagers. Before bedtime, if you had to pick your battles about how much or when, it would be to try to limit the 60 to 90 minutes before bedtime. There's a chance here. We have an opportunity to get better sleep. School schedules are actually been shown to be very bad for teenagers' mental health. And here's a chance to maybe allow a little bit different cycle that might match their actual biorhythms a little bit better. So let's not mess that up with screen time really late into the evening.
All right, Dr. Pisani, we have a lot more questions to get to. When we come back, questions about the long-term psychological impacts of the coronavirus on our children. Coronavirus, Your Good Questions continues next.